In Canada, plant breeding operates in two very different worlds, public and private. Ask a breeder from either side which path leads to the future, you'll usually hear the same answer. Their way is the right way forward. The result is an industry not just divided, but increasingly polarized. So, we went looking for someone in the middle. SeCan's Jeff Reid doesn't buy into the us versus them narrative. He says the middle ground isn't just possible, it's the only way to keep Canadian ag competitive.
So I think Canada has been successful in cereal production largely because we have had world-class infrastructure and breeding programs. And in cereals, those programs that dominate happen to be almost exclusively public programs. And what makes a country successful is different than what it takes to make an individual breeding program successful. If you have the best product, you can be successful as a program, but that's no guarantee to the broader industry. So there's a reason why SeCan is a not-for-profit. And we live or die exclusively by seed sales. And we know that in some markets, it's just very hard to justify very much investment. We need to create the right environment and then set private players up for success.
Part of that means not repeating mistakes from the past.
In Eastern Canada, where we neglected public breeding programs for many years, most private investment then actually disappeared, and now we're left trying to rebuild cereal production, which has plummeted, and that's a long, slow climb to rebuild not only that acreage, but those breeding programs.
That's a real risk today. When the message becomes public programs should step back, who really benefits? It's not farmers.
As a small private breeding entity, it's one thing if you have some great varieties you can just pull off the shelf and cross with, but where does that foundational material come from? We're really concerned about messaging that public breeding programs need to scale back their efforts. Obviously, any given plant breeder would prefer to have less competition, but that's not what's in the industry's long-term best interest, and definitely not in the best interest of farmers. So as an industry, we really want to push for more competition in plant breeding from both public and private sector players.
More competition means more innovation and more steps forward. Yet, the reality of plant breeding itself makes the playing field uneven. Some crops and regions will never attract private investment. Others could, says Reid, especially if value capture tools are part of the equation.
So attracting more players is less a question of policy as it is just really a fact of science. Many crop types and regions will probably never make sense for private investment based on market size and just the physiology of the crop. But having said that, there are places where a VUA could be a really significant part of the solution going forward. And I think cereals in Western Canada have already demonstrated that a VUA can be a big part of our funding solution. I agree with AEFC management when they say that we need to look at every crop in its own context. But VUA won't work for all crops in all regions. In Eastern Canada, for example, in most crop types, the fact is that a lower portion of farm-safe seed and smaller acres means that a VUA is not likely to even cover the costs of administration.
Another big piece of the puzzle is clarity around who pays what.
Understandably, farmers don't want to pay twice for developing varieties. And this misconception really needs to be addressed. What we need is transparency in terms of the total costs of plant breeding on the part of government, so that industry can begin to understand how to fill those funding requirements. Clearly, public breeding is not entirely funded by checkoffs and royalties, but we really need to know what the actual numbers are. We really have a challenge with refundable checkoffs, I think. If farmers believe they're being charged twice for variety development, they're more likely to opt out of refundable checkoffs. And this is a really unfortunate situation.
So where, I asked Jeff, should government put its focus?
I think what we need AFC to focus on is maintaining and enhancing their world-class infrastructure to ensure really that both private and public breeding programs can test material in all the relevant regions and have access to pathology, quality analysis, and everything else that's required to bring finished varieties to the market. We hear a lot about AEFC moving upstream, and I'm not sure who really benefits from that. Universities, NSERC, and others are doing great work there. And as an example of that, we've just recently seen established a pre-breeding position at the Crop Development Center. Germplasm enhancement, I don't think it works if you're not producing finished varieties. It's easy to introgress new traits if you don't need to worry about all the baggage that comes with them. And what we've seen is lots of previous efforts to develop germplasm that never really saw the light of day because it just wasn't an adapted material. I think the only real ground truthing for germplasm development is whether it achieves market share in farmers' fields.